If U.S. bases are taking hits, American soldiers are dying, and the president is still selling calm, then this is no longer just a foreign policy story. It is a credibility story. And those are the moments that get dangerous, fast. Because wars do not only explode on the battlefield, they also explode in the gap between what people can see and what they are being told. And right now, that gap is getting harder to hide. The official language is always cleaner than the real thing. The statements come out polished. The camera angle is controlled. The words are chosen like they were designed to keep your pulse below a certain number. Limited, contained, measured, under control. But look underneath the phrasing, and the picture gets uglier fast. Satellite imagery has shown damage at U.S.-linked facilities across the Gulf. Public reporting says casualty counts have climbed. A U.S. fighter jet was shot down over Iran, and days after Trump claimed Iran had no anti-aircraft capability left, another American aircraft was reportedly hit. That is not what under control looks like. That is what escalation looks like when the messaging is trying to outrun the facts. And that is the first thing you need to understand. This story is not just about whether America is winning or losing some neat scoreboard in the desert. It is about whether the public is being prepared for the real cost of this war, or being managed through it with the softest possible language until the bill gets too big to ignore. That is the whole fight. Because once bases start burning, this stops being abstract. Once soldiers start dying, this stops being rhetorical. And once the political sales pitch starts sounding cleaner than the battlefield, people begin asking the question every government hates most. What else are they not telling us? That is where this gets explosive. And for an American audience, that matters more than any dramatic map graphic on cable news. Because the moment a war starts producing visible damage, rising casualties, and contradictions between official claims and real events, trust becomes part of the battlefield too. You can survive bad news. What governments struggle to survive is the feeling that they edited the truth until it was too small to recognize. And that is the mood building right now. Here is the first hard reality. Iran's response was never going to be clean, local, or symbolic forever. Once U.S. and Israeli strikes expanded, retaliation was always likely to hit the wider American footprint in the region. That footprint is huge. Air bases, fleet headquarters, logistics hubs, troop sites, diplomatic compounds, fuel nodes, communications centers. It is a sprawling target system sitting inside missile range, drone range, proxy range, and political range all at once. And public reporting now shows that several of those places have taken real damage. That matters, because a lot of Americans still imagine war as something that happens over there until the United States decides otherwise. But modern war does not respect that mental boundary. If America projects power into a region, that network becomes part of the war. Every runway, every barracks, every fuel depot, every radar dish becomes a sentence in the enemy's response. And Iran knows that. That is why this is not just a contest of firepower. It is a contest of exposure. America has bigger weapons. Iran has more ways to make the war feel sticky, expensive, and politically toxic over time. That is the game. And once you see it that way, the phrase, "bases are burning," stops sounding like drama and starts sounding like strategy. Iran does not need to defeat the United States in a classic sense. It needs to prove that American power comes with a visible price. A painful price. A price that cannot be hidden behind adjectives. That is how you create pressure. And then there is the second reality. Casualty numbers are not static in the early phase of a war. They move. They get revised. They get clarified. They get repackaged. But that does not make them meaningless. It makes them politically radioactive. Military.com reported 13 U.S. troops dead and 365 wounded in Operation Epic Fury. Stars and Stripes separately reported casualty numbers rising as the war expanded. So when the public hears language that sounds softer than the trend line, the suspicion is predictable. People start wondering whether the messaging is built to inform them or to pace them. That is the second signal. Do not just watch the headline number. Watch whether the language keeps shrinking the event after the facts keep enlarging it. Because that is usually where the break begins. And here is the concrete example that changes the whole mood. Trump publicly said Iran had no anti-aircraft equipment. Then a U.S. fighter jet was shot down over Iran, triggering a high-risk rescue mission. You do not need a think tank to explain why that lands badly. If the battlefield can embarrass the talking point that quickly, people stop hearing confidence and start hearing salesmanship. That is the kind of moment that cuts through spin. Because Americans can tolerate tough news better than politicians think. What they do not tolerate well is being talked to like the evidence on the ground is less real than the words at the podium. And the evidence has become harder to wave away. Satellite imagery described by ABC showed significant damage at the U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters area in Bahrain, including destroyed buildings and communications equipment. Other reporting has described wider damage across regional installations tied to U.S. operations. That means this is not a symbolic exchange of press releases. It is a war producing visible scars on physical American infrastructure in the Gulf. That is not nothing. That is not background noise. That is what war looks like when it stops asking permission to become politically expensive. And here is where the story gets even darker. The military problem and the political problem feed each other. Every new strike creates more pressure for retaliation. Every retaliation creates more exposure. Every exposed base creates more scrutiny. Every casualty figure creates more tension between public patience and official messaging. And every time the White House sounds smoother than reality looks, it adds gasoline to the one fire governments never want during a war: public distrust. That is the cycle. And once that cycle starts, the danger is not just military overreach. It is narrative overreach too. Because if you tell people this is limited, then the map expands, the casualties rise, the oil route gets threatened, and American aircraft start falling out of the sky. The language itself becomes evidence against you. That is why this is bigger than one president and bigger than one party. This is about the oldest temptation in war politics. Tell the public the cleanest version first. Hope the messy version stays compartmentalized long enough to manage. Then pray reality does not arrive faster than your messaging strategy can adapt. But reality has a habit of arriving at speed. And right now, it is arriving with flames, funerals, and footage. That is why the phrase, "Trump is lying," resonates emotionally, even before people sort out every number and every update. Because what people often mean in a moment like this is not only that one sentence was false. They mean the presentation feels smaller than the truth, safer than the truth, more controlled than the truth. And in war, that instinct gets picked up fast. You can feel it in the questions people are asking. If this is contained, why do the casualty totals keep climbing? If Iran is broken, why are American bases still taking damage? If the enemy's defenses are gone, why are American aircraft still getting hit? If this is manageable, why does every day look harder to explain than the last one? Those are not fringe questions. Those are normal questions. And the more normal they become, the harder it gets for any administration to hold the emotional center. Now here is the part that should worry Washington most. Wars do not become politically dangerous only when they are lost. They become politically dangerous when the public starts feeling that the cost curve is rising faster than the honesty curve. That is the real trap. Because once citizens start believing they are getting a delayed version of the truth, they reinterpret everything. Every update sounds filtered. Every confident statement sounds rehearsed. Every new explanation sounds like cleanup instead of clarity. And then trust starts dying faster than support. That is when even tactical wins can start feeling strategically hollow. And this is where the American audience comes in. Most people do not follow Gulf-based maps for fun. They follow consequences. They follow gas prices. They follow whether another war is opening with one sales pitch and evolving into something larger. They follow whether soldiers are being put in harm's way under a public story that keeps changing shape. That is why this can go viral as a political story, not just a war story. Because it contains the three ingredients that always punch through: visible damage, human cost, and a growing suspicion that the official script is too neat for the chaos it is trying to describe. That combination is combustible. And there is another layer. Once the Strait of Hormuz gets pulled into the crisis, this stops being only about missiles and bases. It becomes about oil, inflation, shipping, and whether the war can now reach into the daily cost of American life. So even people who do not care about military strategy start caring fast. A war can feel far away until it starts affecting the pump, the grocery bill, the stock market, and the national mood. Then suddenly, the question is no longer, what is happening over there? It becomes, why were we told this was smaller than it is? That is the turning point. And once that turn happens, the administration does not just need battlefield competence. It needs narrative credibility. It needs the public to believe that when officials speak now, they are speaking from the front edge of the truth, not the trailing edge of it. That is a much harder war to win. So what happens next? 3 things decided. First, whether the casualty trend keeps rising. Second, whether Iranian and proxy attacks keep proving that the U.S. regional footprint remains vulnerable. Third, whether Trump keeps using language that the next 24 hours can disprove. That last one matters more than people think. Because in a conflict like this, one bad statement is not just one bad statement. It becomes a viral measuring stick. People hold every future claim against it. The moment a leader sounds more certain than reality, reality starts looking like the honest actor in the room. And that is a brutal position for any president. So here is the cleanest way to say it. If U.S. bases are taking real damage, if American soldiers are dying in rising numbers, and if the public message keeps arriving polished, while the battlefield keeps arriving bloody, then this war has already crossed out of the comfort zone. Not because America cannot hit back, it can. Not because Iran is stronger overall, it is not. But because the hardest wars politically are not the ones where the facts are simple. They are the ones where the country can feel the truth outrunning the script. And that is what this looks like right now. A war widening faster than the language, a battlefield uglier than the briefing, a public story straining to stay cleaner than the evidence. That is why this matters. That is why people are angry. And that is why the question is no longer just what Iran does next. It is whether the White House can tell the truth at the speed of the war. Because if it cannot, the flames at those bases will not just light up the Gulf, they will light up Washington too.